Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Toby Eunice with a Gypsy's Kiss. Stick with me for a couple of seconds and we're going to have a nice conversation about the media and the search community with Cynthia Meachum. Hey, everybody, we're glad you could join us tonight. We thought that we had planned to discuss this as part of our panel event tomorrow night, but Cynthia was concerned and expressed those concerns to me that we might be taking away from what our panel is all about, and that is we go through all the trouble of inviting a guest to our panel, and we wanted to make sure that the focus was on the guest and that we wanted to address some of these issues in this separate presentation. And what we're going to talk about is our experiences as searchers, and in my case as a journalist, and in Cynthia's case as a subject for a lot of different articles on what we're experiencing right now and what you can do to take advantage of that, or if in the case of you becoming one of the people that these journalists interviews, because we think there's going to be more and more of those, exactly what to do. So we're going to cover a lot of territory in tonight's program. I've told Cynthia that we'll use as much time as we need, and I'm going to walk her through a set of questions, and then we're going to open it up to the room, so we'll enable you to ask some questions as well. Okay, so it's a completely open night. We'll get everything answered, and we'll have a nice long conversation on the subject. So let's get straight to it. Cynthia, first of all, how did we get to this point?
So this sort of all started with an interview and a search that I was to take a writer on who had interviewed Fenn the day before. So during driving around, I believe it was on the way back to the hotel, I can't remember exactly how it started, but basically he asked me if I ever thought that Forrest slipped and accidentally gave, whether it's me or whoever he's talking to, like a clue or an accidental hint. Mm-hmm. And I don't. I think my response to him was, no, I don't think that he does. And I asked him, why do you say that? What do you think he told you? And Ralph would not share with me exactly what he thought the slip was. And I respected that. So, but then he went on immediately to say, and this is what I guess what everybody's waiting for, and I know this is going to be a huge letdown, and I'm sorry about that. No, he went on to say, I think Fenn hid the treasure chest in Yellowstone. Okay, big. Now you all can snicker. Digging Gypsy, if you're watching and everybody else searching that area, you can cry. I smiled at him because he was so serious. He really thought he got a clue, which just shows how naive he is as a new person talking to Fenn. Mm-hmm. And so then and it pretty much ended there, because he explained his situation was, if I am watching a magician do a magic trick and I accidentally see how the trick is done, it is not fair for me to reveal that trick to the public. It's not fair to the magician. So he said the same thing applies to Fenn. It's not fair for me to reveal what he might have accidentally told me. Well, Fenn, I mean, my God, all you have to do is read The Thrill of the Chase, and 50% of the people out there searching over the last 8 years probably have assumed it's Yellowstone. So that in itself was not really that big of a reveal. But then the more I thought about it, and we didn't talk anything more about that. But as I drove home from Santa Fe, the more I thought about that is the fact that he had spent like 8 hours with Forrest, and obviously Forrest is telling him a lot more than just what's in The Thrill of the Chase. I'm sure, Fenn went over it's a generic interview probably.
Right, 8 hours.
And we've read the articles in various magazines over the last 8 years. But what I thought about was, so this was the very first interview that Ralph had with Fenn. And so after however much time it really was, it was at least a full day, he goes away with the thought that it's hidden in Yellowstone. So I'm thinking, maybe. And if I was still searching New Mexico, I would have dismissed it. I was so happy he didn't say Denver, for one thing, because I have nothing for Denver. But anyway, if I wasn't already searching in Yellowstone, I would not let this sway me.
Right.
But I was, and so I'm going to use it as confirmation bias.
Right.
And so then, whether you want to call it a dilemma or not, my dilemma as I'm driving home is, should I share this with other searchers, whether or not they're searching in the Yellowstone, Montana area, and let them smile and think, oh, this is great for me? Or should I just totally ignore it? Or if there's any new people out there that are on the fence and they don't really have a great solution, they don't even sort of know how to start putting the clues to places on a map or whatever, should I just share it with the community? So it ended up, Toby had invited me to be on tomorrow's panel, and the topic was going to be Fenn in the media. So it's like, oh, this is perfect. I can just mention this on Toby's show. Well, then I talked to Toby about it, and it's like, no, this won't work because that's not fair to the guest, because this is going to probably overshadow whatever the guest has to say. So Toby agreed to do this, and I really do think that this was the best way to handle this. And so I've tried to keep up with most of the blogs over the last couple of days, just to follow the comments on the blogs. And I've gotten a lot of personal emails as well. And it seems like it's pretty much a 50-50 split, with people blaming me for creating all this false hype, and I'm nobody, I'm just a searcher, blah, 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 which is true. But one thing I do want everyone to understand is, this was not Toby who came to me and asked me to do this. This was me going to Toby. Toby is not the one that created any kind of false hype. So for the people that are all upset about that, sorry about that. Blame me, don't blame Toby. So let's move on.
All right. So I do have several questions that I want to ask you. And the first are very straightforward. They're what I call reverse questions. I want you to knock down some rumors, if you will. So first, why are you calling this journalist by the name of Ralph?
So before I even did this interview, I was asked not to talk about the magazine he was writing the article for, nor to mention his name before it gets published, because what happens is people find out that so-and-so is writing an article for such and such a magazine, and they either email or call the writer, and they want to be part of it. So I've been told in the past, you don't mention that beforehand, but then I guess, after it's published, obviously it's okay to talk about it. So that is that. So, and then not only that, but because there was, a lot of negative feedback to me regarding Ralph. I don't know if it's about the fact that Ralph told me he thinks Forrest slipped, or the fact that Ralph implies that he's going to go to Yellowstone and actually do a search. But there has been a lot of negativity. So obviously, I don't want to, get this guy in trouble or hurt him in any kind of a career way or whatever. And so the whole thing about Ralph is, in my opinion, I thought Ralph was really naive. He was a fairly likable guy for a while, and then I sort of got an attitude with the questions regarding the death of the searchers, and then I think it was horrible that Fenn did not call off the hunt because of that, and that obviously is not a good way to get on my good side. That's probably about the worst thing he could have said to me. But then we got over that, and he turned out to be a pretty good guy. I wouldn't probably want him to be my search buddy ever, because he's friggin' afraid of snakes. How can you be a Fenn treasure hunter and be
afraid of snakes?
All right. Whatever. Anyway, but we parted ways, good friends. He and I will try to get together, whether it's for a search together or just to chit chat up in Yellowstone sometime in June. I definitely do hope that I get to see this guy again.
All right. So let's knock down a couple of others, and then I'm going to add to what you just said and ask you some more questions.
Okay.
Is Ralph Sam Gilbert?
So I'm glad that you brought up Sam. They are not the same person.
Okay.
So Sam, but I want to talk about Sam because this is probably, people have already leaked this on the blogs weeks or months.
Yeah, I was going to ask, why can we talk about Sam Gilbert?
Well,
but talk about Sam.
I don't know if he wants me to talk about him, but I'm going to because
everybody knows his name.
Well, when Fenn came out and talked about there were going to be 2 big articles or whatever, and people already had been interviewed by Sam Gilbert for The Guardian, he interviewed a lot of people. I don't know how many months he's been working on the project. I interviewed with him twice in person. He lives in Santa Fe, so it was real easy for him to come to Rio Rancho and my home. And he was just a real sweetheart of a journalist. So for all the people that think it's Sam, it's not. If you end up calling Sam and saying, "What did you tell Cynthia?" he will not know what the hell you're talking about. So
right. So let's knock down one more. Is the magazine Vanity Fair?
No, it was not.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to add a couple of things to that you said, and this is from my experience. This is actually my experience as a journalist. If you're a searcher and have been invited to speak with a journalist in an interview for a particular subject, likely for the chase, there's a couple of things that you should be aware of. Number one, the journalist is going to assume that everything, that conversation is on the record. That is, they can use whatever you say, unless you specifically tell them that what you're about to say is off the record. If you decide that you want to say something that is off the record, have them turn off their audio recorder or their video recorder, state what you want to say that's off the record, and then go back on the record. Now, they're allowed to make notes about your off the record comments, but they cannot use them for you. Let me give you a really plain example. Let's say I was being interviewed and the gentleman said, "Where do you think the effort is going this summer?" And I said, "Off the record." And he turns off his recorder. And I were to say, I'm making this up, okay? Dale Neitzel is focusing on the Firehole River. And he's an in-the-know guy. That's completely off the record, so he can't bring it up again. And he can ask Dale whether or not he's searching the Firehole River, but he can't say how he discovered that. He can't indicate that he had a source. Then we would go back on the record. But that the assumption when that person walks into that interview is that the entire interview is on the record unless you specifically state it is off the record. That's the first thing. The second thing that journalist is expecting is that when they walk into that interview, that the interview is effectively a one-sided, a unilateral non-disclosure agreement. And what I mean by that is they can talk about the interview to whomever they want. They can tell Forrest Fenn that they interviewed Cynthia and this was the results of. But the expectation when they walk in is that you can't talk about it. You can't tell them who the writer is. You can't tell them what they're writing for. You can't tell them the topic of the article, and you can't tell them the magazine unless there is some other agreement. So one of the things that you can do is you can ask the journalist whether or not you can share this information with anyone else, right? But that has to be an agreement because their understanding when they walk in is that it's a one-sided non-disclosure agreement. You can't talk about it, but they can. Okay? So those are the two things that you have to keep in mind when all of this happens, and that's how most journalists work. And it sounds to me like Ralph wasn't unusual in that matter, that it was working for him as well. Okay, so let's go on. Let's talk about Fenn slipping, right? He made a slip. Now, it's my understanding that Ralph is behaving like any news searcher who had a face-to-face meeting with Forrest Fenn. His conclusion was that Forrest said something to him that indicates that the treasure is hidden in Yellowstone, and then he went back home and he made reservations for a trip to Yellowstone in June. That behavior to me is not unusual. It sounds to me like every new searcher. As a matter of fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to send him the Just the Facts video that we made last week, just to let him know, because I'm sure he assumes he knows exactly where it is. But the question is, the question for you, Cynthia, is what are the chances that Forrest, quote, slipped up, unquote, in front of this journalist?
In my opinion, Forrest definitely did not slip up. Forrest is not the kind of guy that slips. I think Forrest is just as sharp as he was probably 8 years ago. And the whole thing about Fenn and him doing interviews. So for 8 years, Forrest has done radio, TV, any kind of a print project. And he has never, I mean, and we get to read some of it. And of course, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't make the TV show or the print. But no one is getting any closer than what? Two people were within 200
feet.
Back
Right.
like in 2011 or 12.
Right.
Here we are 5, 6 years, 7 years later, and no one still has it. So I really don't think Forrest is not savvy enough to accidentally make a slip. And with him, I know some people have mentioned about it on the blog about, yeah, well, he's almost 88 years old. So, he might be, for lack of a better term, getting dementia or whatever and not realize. I totally do not believe that. I still think he's cognizant of every word he uses. And I don't think there was any kind of a slip.
Got it. Let me add to that. In my opinion, that if you believe that Forrest Fenn slipped while you were slipped up in terms of providing a hint or a clue while you were speaking with him, it is very probable that Forrest wanted you to think that he slipped up when you were having that conversation with him. For somebody, if you look at the history of this chase, one of the things that Fenn has done really, really well is maintained the consistency of his story. And honestly, we're going to do a frequently asked question on that later tonight, because the first thing that falls apart if things are a hoax is the consistency of the story. And Fenn's done a really good job of maintaining that consistency. And my sense is that the journalist, being with Fenn for 8 hours, heard him say something that Fenn either intended or didn't intend to be a slip up. My guess is he didn't intend it to be, but it was enough for that new searcher, which is what he at this point, he's no longer a journalist. He's just your average, excitable new searcher that's never been boots on the ground and heard Fenn say something that he probably hasn't heard him say before. My guess is whatever Fenn said, he said 100 times before, and we've already heard it, but this was his first experience with Fenn. So he heard it for the first time. And all it takes is a little bit of that for a first-time searcher to change search locations, go looking for it. This is not a criticism of anybody's Yellowstone search solution. But for a first-time searcher, when I heard the story about him buying tickets, honestly, it sounded like your average searcher, like what an average searcher that just spent 8 hours with Fenn would do. So, okay, let's go on. You already talked about Sam and the Guardian. We know that an article is coming out. Everybody knows who Sam is. We also know now that Sam is not Ralph, and that the Guardian is not the publication that you've been talking about. Is there anything else that you want to talk about Sam and where he's at with his article?
No, but one thing that I think that the journalists that I have worked with in the last couple months who are really writing the big articles. So I think the big articles means they're interviewing with Fenn for many hours.
Mm-hmm.
They're interviewing a lot of searchers, not maybe some just me, but I don't think so. I think a lot of searchers are being interviewed, and this is they're gathering their material over the course of probably at least weeks. So I just I think once they start this, it's such a huge story that then they end up to where they are thinking ahead, and it's like, okay, maybe the story that they're currently working on is just about Forrest Fenn and the fact he hit a treasure, and they're going to interview or talk to a couple searchers. But then once they really get into it and they spend days or hours with Fenn, they interview tons of searchers, they go out on actual searches with searchers,
Mm-hmm.
they are thinking ahead. That's like, oh my God, I can get X number of more stories out of this. And the reason, when you just mentioned Sam, the second interview I did with him was at my home, and he was real interested in my maps. I love maps, as you do too, Tony.
Yeah.
And or Toby, I'm sorry.
No
And
worries.
so I had all my maps spread out on the kitchen counter for him. And when he left, he tapped the maps on the table, and he said, "I'm coming back for this." I'm not sure exactly what that meant, but to me, it meant he already was thinking ahead of another story, because there's just so much out there that it's not all going to go into one article. And then back to Ralph and future journalists, I think the fact that Ralph got tickets to go to Yellowstone, if he's going to continue to write about Fenn, the treasure hunters, and whatever, in my opinion, he needs to get boots on the ground, and he has to understand what it's like when whether he thinks Fenn told him Yellowstone, or I get Yellowstone because of reading The Thrill of the Chase. You cannot possibly understand the vastness of where you're going and the likelihood of actually finding the chest without getting boots on the ground and going out there. And I think that's one reason he did it. He actually had a spot where maybe he thinks, he has a shot. He has a shot just like I have a shot. So, and then the fact that he will meet up with me as well. And I don't know if he wants me to take him on one of my searches, or if he just wants to interview me and get an update, because I'm going soon. He's not going to the end of June. That gives me a lot of time to give him more places where the treasure chest is not. So anyway, I don't think people should read so much into that.
Yeah, and so talk a little bit about whether or not, because I did see it dropped in a couple of the forums, about whether or not we can trust Forrest to maintain the integrity of the search, and that he's not going to be sharing hints or clues with journalists or anyone else for that matter. Not that it wasn't a journalist, but what is your sense of where Forrest is in all of that right now?
I think Forrest is as tight-lipped now and has as much integrity now as he ever did. Yeah. I'm not so sure it's not worse now, where he gives out less information. Regarding the information that is being given to the media, and Toby, I don't know if this is a question you were going to ask me later or not, but the searchers are so concerned about Fenn talking to one journalist who now appears like he might go search. What about all the searchers who are giving all their ideas and their solutions to the poem to one journalist? So the example I'm going to use is at Fenbury last year, Dan Barbarisi has a contract with Schuster & Schuster to write a book on the searchers. Dan was at Fenbury last year for the whole weekend, and I don't know how many searchers he interviewed, but it was a lot. I saw searchers who are so tight-lipped with their information to almost everyone, sitting there, they had their notebooks out, and they were taking him through every step of their solve, through their maps and everything. So let's say Barbarisi interviewed a dozen searchers and he's getting all their information. I think his project's multiple years in the making. I think his book is estimated to be published like in 2020. Mm-hmm. Or someone hopefully will have found the treasure by then. Mm-hmm. But regardless, So I think one of the things the searchers maybe aren't even thinking about is we're also willing to spill our guts and our ideas to a journalist. Well, has anyone considered what if a journalist sits down, they compile uh, the searches and the information from 30 people? Could they possibly put something together from all the information we were giving them?
That's
And
actually how that works.
coming directly from Fenn.
Yeah.
So before everyone wants to hammer me or Forrest or maybe Toby you at some point, I think that's one of the big topics, and that was actually something I wanted to talk about today.
All right. Well, good. So I do want to add that. So let me ask the question first. What was it that Ralph thought that Forrest said that led him to believe that the treasure is hidden in Yellowstone? Did he tell you that? Did
No,
he?
that is what he would not tell me.
Oh, okay.
And so after thinking about it more, and after some of the things that you said today, it's really a shame that he wouldn't share that with me. And he knew that Forrest and I had been close over the years and we had conversed a lot. That's why he was asking me, did I think Forrest ever slipped with an accidental clue during the conversations that I had? And no, I mean, as a new searcher, you might think that,
Right.
but then once you get to know him, it's like, no,
Yeah.
if anything, he's playing.
There's a part of me that believes that, and I'm just going to throw a number out there, 50% of the solutions to this problem have been influenced by what that searcher thinks is a Fenn slip up, right? With all the things, with all the communications you get from Fenn, at some point or the other, you feel like he said something that actually drives your solution. And I'm willing to bet that the idea that Fenn could, quote, slip up, unquote, and lead you to Yellowstone is not unusual in the sense that at least half of the solutions that are out there have been influenced by what that searcher believes is a Fenn slip up. So we have a question from, I have to read this because he did a super chat.
Yeah.
This is from William Ortiz. And he says, Cynthia, are you scared to have a journalist on a search if you haven't eliminated an area with your solution and it's out to the public before you finish? Believing, it sounds like to me, that the journalist would reveal the location of his search area.
That's a good question. And I have never taken a journalist to a place that I thought the treasure might be at, except one time. It was Isaac Cole did a podcast in Red River, and I really, really wanted to go check this trailhead. And Toby, we talked about it.
Yeah.
It's Goose Creek Trail.
Right.
So beforehand, I told Isaac, I said, this is my first time to this area. I have some really good solutions for it. And we recorded it. It was just audio. And I said, we really do need to talk about this just in case we'd get lucky, that how we're going to divide up the treasure if we find it together. But other than that, I know I will be criticized for saying this as well, but there is no way in hell I will take a camera crew with me to a spot where I have 95% confidence it's going to be there. For one thing, I don't know what my reaction would be if I found it. For sure, I'd probably cry. I mean, you have to cry out of joy, right?
Right.
Or you pass out, or I just don't know.
You would do something. You would do
that's
something that you didn't want to be on camera. Is what
right,
you would.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. So because I don't really know how I would react, that isn't something that I want the media to have rights to. And back to Isaac Cole, I think the way we handled it, if we would find it, was he had the rights to the coverage, and I got the chest, and I might throw him a gold nugget,
a gold bone or something.
Yeah, he wasn't getting much, but he would have had the footage.
So let me ask that another way. So you've already publicized the move of your solution from New Mexico up north. And
Yes.
you haven't specifically said Yellowstone. I don't know necessarily that you've excluded it. So let me ask William's question a different way. Does it bother you that you're going to have a journalist with a following searching the area, an area that's near the area that you're going to be searching this summer?
No, what I will do is, because I'm going up there soon, I will actually go search. For one thing, I am going to Yellowstone. I'm going to be in the park.
Mm-hmm.
Most of that is just for my own pleasure and creating my own memories and treasures. I mean, you can't help but find really good solutions. I mean, my God, if you're going to start with Warm Waters Halt, it doesn't get much better than inside Yellowstone.
Right.
Whether or not I really think it's there, nah, not so much. But I have a couple places I'm going to check, because it's like, I'm not going to go up there for a week and not look. Those places, then, if I meet Ralph up there and he would like to go with me there, I would be happy to take him there. But by then I will already know it's not there. Did that answer it, Toby?
Yeah, I think so. So let's go back. And one of the reasons we ended up having this conversation was the commentary around the phrase, quote, level the playing field,
Yeah.
unquote. Tell me so you used that phrase, and I believe that you didn't use it in a derogatory way, right? I don't think you expected to feel that way. Tell me what you meant, but when you used the phrase level the playing field.
That's a really good question. And I also hate that phrase. It's just that I don't know another phrase to use that has the same meaning. So when I used it, the fact that he had spent 8 hours with Fenn, he thinks Fenn may have slept, and whether, anymore, that's sort of irrelevant.
Right.
The fact he spent so much time with Fenn, and then he thinks it's in Yellowstone. So my leveling the playing field, and it didn't change my spot, because that's where I was going anyway. So to me, I'm thinking, okay, should I share this with other people? And either they can have the smile because it's confirmation bias,
right,
or people have the prerogative to totally ignore it, as if I wasn't searching there, I'd ignore it. Or there again, people on the fence, newer people that don't know, maybe it gives them direction, or not. And then one last thing that sort of sounds, I don't know. One of the things I thought about is like, okay, what if I really luck out and I find the chest in Yellowstone or Yellowstone area? And since Ralph already interviewed me and knows me, what if Ralph writes an article about me and he says, oh yeah, I remember this woman. I interviewed her back in April in Santa Fe. And I told her at the time that Fenn slipped, and I told her it was in Yellowstone. So is that covering my ass?
Mm-hmm.
Sort of.
Right.
That this is public now. I mean, I could have made it public that he said that to me and this was a reason, just by sending an email with a date stamp on it.
Mm-hmm.
But that was one thing I did think about, because I don't want him coming back later on, if I luck out and find it, saying, hey, I'm the one that told you that's where it is.
So I've got a question from Dagmar Did It, and she wants to know, Cynthia, does the media pay you for your interviews?
No.
They don't.
Nope.
They're all done. What you're going to find is that the media thinks it's your privilege that they've decided to interview you. And when you get called by the media, I'm going to highly recommend that you agree to the interview. It's in your best interest to do so. But you remember those two rules that I stated earlier: the difference between on the record and off the record, and the fact that the non-disclosure is one-sided. You can't talk about it, but they can. Lori James, okay, we already answered that. We answered that. Dr. Brown says, Cynthia, do you wear snakeskins on your boots on the ground searches?
I do not. I'm not afraid of no little stinking rattlesnakes.
Calazars, our friend Mike Cowling, would like to know, did Ralph say if he was putting this information into the article? And I suppose that means the fact that the information that Fenn dropped or had a slip up, and it led the journalist to Yellowstone.
No, he is not.
Yeah.
I asked when Ralph wouldn't tell me at the moment. I asked him if he would put it in the article, and he said no. And then that's when he said, if I saw a magician's trick, it's not fair to the magician. It's not fair to Fenn. So no, he is not going to put it in the article.
So the kid asks, and he answers his own question, but I'm going to ask the question anyway because I know the answer, and I believe you know the answer. I'm going to ask the first part of it and ignore the rest of it. So, AGK, where are these searchers' names, apparently the ones that are interviewed by the media, for interviews coming from? Where do they get the names for the people to interview?
I actually hand out names by permission. I've almost always, after I interview with a writer, they will ask me, do I know anybody else that they can talk to? And I have a short list of folks in New Mexico who have given me permission to give them their emails. So I usually only give out an email, and I tell the journalist to please email this person, and then if they want to exchange a phone number or whatever, they can.
So,
and then back to
go ahead.
other searchers. Most of the media is so savvy that all they have to do is Google Forrest Fenn, and they get up. What is there? A billion YouTube channel now, websites.
It's not quite. It's a lot of them.
And one of the things I always ask the journalists when I first talk to them is, how did you find me? And anymore, probably 75% of the time, it's because they found my website. So this is this year. It wasn't always, or it came from Dale. And every now and then maybe Forrest, but I don't even think they go to Forrest anymore because
you don't have to.
Dale is such a big name in the blog community that if they ask Dale, he often will send them to me, or like I said, they just find me through the Google and my website.
Yeah. So let me give you a little background on that as well. Generally speaking, if you're writing for a large publication, whether print or online, or if you're setting up a recorded interview, but let's say the print publication, you're going to have someone assigned to you called a research assistant. And their job is to go out and find sources for you. What I mean by sources, if it's the kind of article that's going to require a lot of interviews, they're going to help you find sources. They're going to validate those sources. So the more often you use your real name rather than a forum name or a screen name, the more likely it is that research assistant is going to find you. Now, the first place that they go to is Google, and they enter, like Cynthia said, Forrest Fenn treasure. And names start popping up. So if you're Toby Eunice and you have a YouTube channel with Shelley Carney, your name's going to pop up. If you respond a lot in the forums or you have a lot of posts in the forums, that name will pop up, but it's going to be your forum name. So their job is to produce that kind of research that gets them started. Then as a journalist, what you're going to do is after you complete an interview with that individual, you're going to ask them if they can provide you additional names. And as Cynthia's done the wise thing, ask permission in advance. If the situation happens to you and the journalist asks you if you know of anyone else who's in the search community that would make an interesting interview, then if you already have permission for them, give them their email address. Don't give them a phone number. Their email address is fine. If you don't have permission from them, the way that you handle it is you tell the journalist to give you their email address. Talk to the person who you think would make a good reference and have them send an email to the journalist agreeing to the interview in advance. So, but it's not hard to get them. And yeah, it seems to me that the community is growing larger, and so more and more people are getting on in the interviews. And I wanted to address that as well, because earlier Cynthia was talking about Fenn's strategy here. My sense is that tactically speaking, Fenn has a very broad communication strategy. As long as he's alive, we're going to see him talk about this treasure hunt. And we're going to believe that he's going to have slip-ups that we're going to incorporate into our solutions. but I think his tactics are changing. I think he's moving away from video recorded and perhaps even audio recorded interviews. And I think part of that is due to Fenn is a proud and sometimes vain man. And when you're that age, you don't show up well on camera. You're starting to experience those breathing problems. You're hard of hearing. So because he's a proud man, I think he's going to more and more avoid those video recorded interviews. When he said in the Nightlight interview that might be his last one, I'm pretty sure that's what he meant. But that doesn't prevent him from doing these interviews that are not recorded other than by a journalist's audio recorder in print or online publications. I think we'll start to see more and more of those. In addition to that, it strikes me that Fenn is building up what I'd refer to as a cadre of trusted public relations agents of the category, and that's not a negative, of the category of Cynthia or Jenny Kyle or Dale Neitzel, or in the case of most recently Richard McDonald, the Illinois Ghost, and Mike Cowling. I've noticed that he's communicating. We're going to talk about this tomorrow night. He's communicating with more and more people, and that's getting the word out, and it's dropping this language that helps keep the search at the top of the search list. And of course, he enhanced all of that when he said he expected it to be found, or that he had a sense that it was going to be found this summer. So he's a strategically savvy guy. He's also a very tactically savvy guy. And I think what we're seeing with all this activity, especially in print, and what I mean by print is actually print publications or online versions of those publications, I think we're going to continue to see activity as long as he is physically capable. But I think we're also going to see less and less of him in video, filmed or video interviews. So let me get to questions here for you. Cynthia, do you make sure you are not being followed, I imagine, when you're going out on your recons?
I have never seen anyone following me. In New Mexico, there's hardly anyone that lives here. There's hardly any, I shouldn't make light of this. There really are a lot of treasure hunters in New Mexico. I have the good fortune of being able to search Monday through Friday. I don't have to wait till a weekend. As far as I know, I have never, definitely never been followed by anybody else I thought was a searcher. And on the trails and then off the trails where I went, there's just not many people there.
Yeah, we don't.
So, no, I don't ever think that anyone followed me, and I don't watch for it.
We have said consistently now over the past, 5 years, that we have yet to meet anybody on the trail that's indicated an interest in this search. And even more interesting to me, we've been in areas like Lander and Salida and Taos and other cities and towns where we ask questions of people. And generally speaking, it is rare that we find anybody that even knows about the search, much less is interested in the search. So, Cynthia, question for you. Is it possible that, and she says the interviewer, I'm sure she means Ralph, is just saying Yellowstone and is planning actually to go somewhere else?
I did not get an indication that it was tricking me or going anywhere else. I really think he's too new. He's not savvy enough to even come up with something like that, in my opinion. And there again, we shouldn't criticize Ralph for being naive. It's just the way it is when you first start out. And he doesn't have this whole community that he could even, I don't think he was on any of the blogs ahead of time.
No.
And he was so green. I even talked about Donnie in TTOTC. I can't remember what we were talking about. And I said something about, I wished I could have been young back when Forrest and Donnie were friends and running around Yellowstone. And he just looked at me and he said, who's Donnie? So, so Ralph, obviously he had done some homework in order to interview Forrest, but he really didn't even know the book like we do. So I don't think he was smart enough to even know how to trick me.
Yeah.
or he was really smart and he got me good. I don't know, but I don't think so.
My estimation of the conversations that you described having with him are that he naive is probably a good word. He hadn't done any back research, hadn't read the book, probably hadn't seen any of the interviews that Fenn has done. I'm willing to bet that whatever Fenn said to him that stimulated him to start, buying tickets for Yellowstone was something that the rest of the search community or anybody who's been in this for any length of time has probably heard before. But because he heard it for the first time, he probably felt like that was just some great revelation that led him to buy tickets to Yellowstone. You were going to say something. What were you going to say?
Yeah, I'd like to expound on that, and the fact that it's really a shame that Ralph didn't confide in me with what he thought the slip was.
Right.
Because it, I mean, probably 99% of the people that are watching this agree that Forrest doesn't slip unless he wants to make it like he maybe did.
Right.
And it is intentional. But so Ralph probably could have shared that with me, and I could have helped dispel the fact that no, that's not a slip, and then told him whatever it was, or if I had any information about it, whether from just reading all the books and being in the community for 5 years, maybe maybe I could have helped him, but
Right.
no, he was going to stand firm on not sharing it. And there again, I did really respect that. That's his call.
That's an interesting point. If he had decided that he wanted to share it with you and what he came up with is something that Fenn had, exactly the words that Fenn had used at, say, Moby Dickens, you could have said, oh, he said that back in 2013. And most searchers who know this know that's kind of part of the Fenn mythology already. So that's interesting. So I wanted to cover at least one more topic with you, and that is, as a journalist, you deal a lot with ethics, right? And you try to maintain your ethic. And I'm not just talking about your work ethic. I'm talking about your professional ethic. And when I heard, my first reaction when I heard that this guy had decided, based on a conversation he had with Forrest Fenn, that he had decided to start searching in Yellowstone, I thought, well, that's kind of unethical, And then I realized, no, that's what everybody, whether you're Douglas Preston or any of the other friends that Fenn has where he shared this in, the knowledge of the search with, the natural reaction, whether you're a literary agent, a maker of gold jewelry, or a journalist, you talk to this guy for 8 hours, and honestly, you would be crazy if you didn't go look for it, right, at that point. So do you personally, what do you think about this journalist's ethics, taking the time that he spent with Fenn and then deciding he's going to go look for the treasure?
I'm good with it. I don't have a problem with it. For one thing, it's like Forrest emailed me and asked me to put his words on my blog. No, I'm paraphrasing. No one knows where it is but Forrest. So if Ralph wants to go look after interviewing him and all of us or whatever, or it could be ABC's Clayton Sandel. Well, we don't know what Forrest, most of the people probably watching this have seen the ABC Nightline, right, Toby?
Yeah.
And on that, during that interview, I think Fenn said something to the effect that I've already said too much. And that would, you can go back and you can actually see this. Mm-hmm. Now, that entire show, I can't remember, was it like 6 minutes long maybe? It's not real long.
No, it isn't. It's a segment.
Included, other things other than just the interview with Forrest.
Yeah.
So you can understand, or anybody that's done interviews with TV, well, and even the journalists,
they're edited.
You spend all day with them. Yeah. And you get 6 minutes of time. So I understand that Forrest probably talked to Clayton and his crew inside his home, probably for definitely hours. I don't know if it would have been half a day or more. And we got to see 2 minutes of that.
Yeah.
So it's, the information is just we just get really pieces of what goes on between Fenn and the interviewers, and I I don't have a problem with them thinking that they have enough knowledge that they can go out and search, because I totally believe Forrest is so, he's played this game so long with the media,
Right.
he's not going to give them anything that none of us already have.
Right.
And one thing I wanted to reiterate before this ends, and I truly believe it, that if you can't solve the poem, you can't find the chest.
Right. Yeah, it's not going to be. You are not going to find a treasure if with a conversation in a conversation with Forrest in which you believe he directed you to Yellowstone. There is no treasure to be found there. So, let me see if I've got any more questions for you, because I've got all my questions asked. Is there anything that you'd like to add before we finish up in the chat room, Cynthia?
No, I think I think I'm good with everything. There's so now I'm going to sound like I'm tooting my own horn and that I'm the media whore that I am. But I think what most people probably don't understand is how much media there really is, and this year again. So basically, I think the first show might have been the ABC Nightline that came out in January, which was actually filmed and the interviews done last September. October, November, whatever. Yeah. And I have been involved in so much stuff. Last week, I mean, I had something every day. I even called someone else to help out with a Canadian radio show. They wanted Dale. He couldn't do it. I couldn't do it because I had this other stuff with Ralph. And this is so global that I hope the viewers don't start to get all upset and all concerned because there's so much media, of which only a fraction of it we actually get to see. I've done a lot of Japanese stuff that will only ever air in Japan. And then there's interviews that I do that I don't think it ever makes it to print or TV. So I just don't want the viewers to get upset because they think Ralph got information, or that other journalists coming up got information that's unfair or whatever. I just think Forrest is smarter than that. Yeah. And it ain't going to happen.
Yeah. I think what we're dealing with is a normal newbie searcher who just happens to be a journalist is right. What it boils down to. Okay, I think we're done in the chat room. Let me see, make sure I've got all the questions. Shelley, is that all the questions?
Just that one that asked when she was going back up north.
Oh, Cynthia. Let's see. I don't see it. Where is it? At the bottom. Oh, Cynthia from Dagmar did it. When are you headed back north?
In 3 weeks.
And that's...
Actually, I'm headed back north. I'm headed to Wyoming Saturday, but not necessarily to search.
Okay.
And my search in Yellowstone will be the end of May.
Okay. All right, guys. I think we've pretty much done as much damage to this topic as we possibly can. Cynthia, thank you very much for joining us this evening. Thanks for agreeing to do this. I felt like it was something that I wanted to do, and I think your comment that we wanted to make sure that tomorrow night's show is focused on the guest, and I really appreciate your consideration of that and giving us the opportunity to do this beforehand. So thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
To our community, thank you for joining us this evening. I hope all your questions about this subject are answered, and make sure you join us tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Mountain Daylight Time for our weekly panel. Our guest tomorrow night is Troy Barlow. His online name is Why Must I Go? And he's got a new YouTube channel that's growing pretty rapidly. And we'd like to talk to him tomorrow night. Cynthia will be there as a panelist. We've got a big panel tomorrow night. Jason Eunice will be there as a producer. Shelley will be traveling, so won't be joining us tomorrow night. Okay, so we look forward to seeing you 7 p.m. tomorrow night thanks for joining us tonight. And again, Cynthia, last time, thank you very much for agreeing to this. And here we go to outro, guys. Have a good evening.